With the end of the Second World War, the previous international order was a little disrupted, to put it mildly. Most of the old European colonial powers had, somewhat ironically, suffered occupation and seen their home countries ravaged, and this inspired in them the desire to recreate a world that, well, let's be honest, they wanted it back to how it was before the Germans and Japanese had peed all over their respective barbecues. And for France, there was a lot of face and honour to be restored, as they saw it. The quick collapse of the French military in the face of the German blitzkrieg in 1940 left the newly liberated French with a strong desire to re-establish themselves as a great military power once again. The most notable effect of this was nearly 20 years of brutal warfare in their pre-war colonial possessions, notably Indochina and Algeria. But in the immediate post-war period, it was expressed by the wish to be at the forefront of new weapon development, in particular aircraft. This policy would actually pay handsome dividends as France became essentially the main supplier throughout the Cold War for those nations not wanting to be entirely beholden to the United States or the Soviet Union for their aircraft acquisitions. But it wasn't all smooth sailing when it came to getting to that position, and the subject of today's video, the SNCASO SO.8000 Narval, is an example of where overly ambitious design ideas can lead you down design dead ends. The Narval is also a great example of that old aeronautical expression, if it looks right, it is right, being completely wrong, because though the SO.8000 was damn good looking, it was, in fact, utterly terrible. In 1946, with the joint aim of re-establishing their old empire and their pre-war aeronautics industry, the French decided to build a new carrier aircraft to equip their rebuilt fleet, which had just taken delivery of a brand new aircraft carrier loaned to them from the British, the Aeromanche. This came along with a bunch of British Seafires, which, to be fair, wasn't ideal, something I delve into in my video on that particular aircraft. The perceived need to build their own was such that the Société Nationale de Construction Aéronautique du Sud-Ouest, SNCASO more commonly known as Sud-Ouest, was given the job of creating the new carrier fighter. This company was at the forefront of France's plans to re-establish itself as a builder of cutting-edge aircraft, and was at the time busy creating the Triton, France's first jet. So it might seem a bit odd that with the Narval, the French Navy specified that the aircraft be powered with a piston engine. After all, everyone else was rushing headlong into jets. One suspects that the French Naval Air Arm, an organisation that was, after all, undergoing both a recreation and major expansion, decided that a bit of conservatism wouldn't be amiss, and as the Narval was to act as interceptor, fighter and ground attacker, relying on established technology for the power plant might be a good idea. Initially, it was requested that the Rolls-Royce Griffon be employed in the Narval, but apparently these couldn't be sourced. Not really sure why, there were plenty of them about at the time. So instead, the Arsenal de l'Aéronautique was assigned to design a French power plant, which they did. Kind of. They basically ripped off the Junkers Umo 213, but the Germans weren't in a position to complain at the time, so there you are. However conservative the French attitude was in using a piston engine, there can be little doubt that the rest of the aircraft was extremely advanced in concept. The SO.8000 was to be a pusher design, utilising a contra-rotating propeller and a tricycle landing gear. This allowed the cockpit to be mounted well forward, and the pilot was given a bubble canopy that would provide him with excellent visibility. Of all metal construction, the Narval featured a swept crescent wing, while the tail was supported by twin booms that ran either side of the propeller, allowing for a large horizontal stabiliser that ran between the two. Though I don't believe armament was ever fitted to the prototypes, it was projected to be 6 20mm cannon and a bomb load of 1,000 kilograms. On the face of it, all good. But things soon got complicated. The decision to use a piston engine rather than one of the new jets or even a turboprop could be argued to have some validity for the simplicity that it brought to the design process. Unfortunately, the Umo 213, known in its French iteration as the Arsenal 12H2, proved troublesome in development and needed extra work because more horsepower was wanted from it, with the goal being for the engine to produce 2,250 horsepower. The complexities of the engine and design meant that it wasn't until January 1949 that the first attempt to fly the Narval was made. This proved somewhat alarming as the aircraft wasn't capable of getting airborne, with the second prototype also having the same problem. Quite a few modifications therefore had to be made to the aircraft before the first flight could actually be conducted in April 1949. So, for a bit of context, the French were just beginning the flight tests of a piston-engine prop aircraft, while their contemporaries were already flying jet fighter bombers off their carriers. And worse was yet to come. The flight testing demonstrated that the Narval was a pig. Both prototypes rather oddly displayed radically different handling, something that is hardly ideal in an aircraft, let alone one intended for carrier operations. In addition to this, the type had severe stability issues, and it soon became apparent that the cooling system on the SO.8000 was completely inadequate, leading to further issues with the troublesome power plant. And though the estimated speed for the aircraft in design phase had been 453 miles per hour, the absolute maximum that the type ever recorded was a mere 348 miles per hour. Indeed, looking at the reports of the test pilots, the SO.8000, despite its graceful lines, seems to have been somewhat scary to fly. It should also be remembered that the aircraft didn't have an ejector seat, which would have made bailing out an interesting experience, what with those twin propellers located behind the cockpit. Plus, though notionally a carrier aircraft, I'm personally not sure about how much clearance the props would have had coming in to land on a carrier deck, especially as the tricycle landing gear would have meant a nose-up attitude would be needed. That concern is, however, moot, as the SO.8000 Narval never got to see a carrier. In February 1950, with just 43 flights accomplished between the two prototypes, the French decided to abandon the project. The Narval obviously needed a lot of work to make it viable, which may not actually have been possible, and was clearly obsolete as a new aircraft anyway. Instead, the burgeoning Cold War meant that now the French had the option of acquiring quantities of American aircraft instead, picking up surplus F-6F Hellcats initially and ordering new-built Vought F-4U 7 Corsairs to be their primary carrier fighter bombers. Good, sensible, solid choices, and these would form the backbone of the French carrier air arm, supplemented from 1953 by the de Havilland Sea Venom, which was made under license by Sud-Ouest. And that is the story of the SNCASO SO.8000 Narval, a rather fetching-looking aircraft that was basically obsolete from conception, and rather terrible as well.